And then as I was driving along, I said to myself, now, wait a minute. He didn't say that it wouldn't work on the anesthesias of today. And Mr. Ellman, the next morning, I went into the operating room and on my first case, used the technique which you showed me and gave 25% of the usual amount of pentathol and got a perfect surgical anesthesia, and all this week I have been working with from 25 to 35% of the usual amount of pentathol that I would use in surgery. And he says, Mr. Ellman, I happen to be the president of the anesthetists of New Jersey, and I will not turn a patient over to a surgeon when that patient is ready to walk off the table. I want surgical anesthesia, and I am talking about surgical anesthesia. Henry Monroe was absolutely right. You get perfect surgical anesthesia with 35% of what you normally use. He says, now you may think that that was important in 1900, but not important in 1950. Well, let me tell you, it is just as important in 1950 as it was then. Oh, we don't have the deaths that occurred then. At that time, the deaths were 1 in 400, but today our statistics haven't changed much. We have an occasional death, but our own figures show that 1 in 400 is injured in some way by anesthesia. Now, if I can stay 75% away from the saturation point, I never have to worry about an injury from anesthesia. And he says, you may think that doesn't mean a thing, but as an anesthetist, I can tell you that that's very important. And that's why your next classes, Mr. Ellman, will be largely composed of my associates, members of the Anesthesia Association of New Jersey. And that's how come that we have had in our classes probably a larger percentage of the anesthetists in New Jersey than in any state in the Union. As more and more doctors began using the technique, which had been ignored all these years, you would find anesthetists getting up in class and saying to the other men in class, you know, you fellows who only use anesthesia occasionally don't realize what a wonderful thing you have here in the technique which Dave Ellman has told you about. I have surgeons and anesthetists who claim that they have never varied their technique, that they use this for every surgical procedure. Let me tell you what happened out at Forest Hills, Long Island, where we had a class in about the 8th or 9th session. One of the doctors in class stood up and read an open letter written to me by Dr. Fine, head of the Queens County General Hospital, which is one of the largest hospitals in New York City. The letter invited me to speak to a meeting of the staff, specially called together. And I said to the doctor, well, that's a very nice invitation from a very wonderful hospital, but what's the occasion? What's it all about? And the doctor said this. He says, well, I didn't tell you this, Mr. Ellman, when I first joined your classes, but in addition to being in I have my boards in anesthesia. And he says, I specialize in nitrous oxide particularly. You see, I'm the only man in New York allowed to use nitrous oxide at Queens County General Hospital because last year someone else using it had a cardiac arrest, and since it ended disastrously, nobody else has been allowed to use nitrous oxide but me. And he says, when you told us about this technique when the course first began, I wondered how well it would work on nitrous oxide. He said, let me tell you why that's important, and so you'll realize why this invitation has been extended to you. He says, you see, the average man in the East who uses nitrous oxide starts the patient at 93% nitrous oxide and 7% oxygen. And we know that that man is definitely in the danger zone and better get away quick, or he's likely to have what happened at Queens County General. We who have our boards in anesthesia will never start a patient at more than 85% nitrous oxide and 15% oxygen, and even then we get away from there as fast as possible. But he said, along you come with a technique where in the first 50 cases, I have never had to go above 35% nitrous oxide and 65% oxygen, and I can start my patient at that point and decrease from there. And he says, then you realize why when I took these 50 cases, these statistics on 50 cases to Dr. Fine said, that's the finest set of statistics on nitrous oxide that I've ever seen in my life. Where did you learn the technique? And so on. I told him, and that's how come he's extended this invitation and wants you to talk to the staff. I talked to the staff and afterwards was invited to make the same talk at the Queens County Medical Society. And I was called there specifically to address them on this very thing that I'm talking to you about right now. We could give you case histories of surgeon after surgeon who has used this technique. One of the men, I think, has already used it because I think he told about using it in a tonsillectomy or something. Well, you used it. You used it. How did it work for you, doctor?
It worked very good. She didn't complain of any pain at all afterwards.
Uh-huh.
I've been doing tonsillectomies. I know that you had a lot of pain afterwards. And she said absolutely her throat wasn't being sore.
You see, now there's the kind of results that you have. Did any of you others try it? Anybody else here try it? How'd you...
Very little anesthetic. Very good healing.
You'll not only have good healing, but you'll have good anesthesia. And you did have good anesthesia, isn't that right, doctor? It's such a simple procedure. All you have to do is to bypass the critical factor because the anesthesia seems to implant the selective thinking. You don't even have to do the two things necessary in hypnosis. Do just the first thing. Bypass the critical factor. Start your anesthesia. Incidentally, I have been told by quite a few men in OBGYN that it works beautifully when you're first learning hypnosis to see how you can carry a person through a complete delivery without them feeling a solitary thing when you use the Mayo technique for delivery. Try it, some of you who are doing a lot of OBGYN work, and you'll be delighted with it because until you learn the techniques for carrying a person entirely through on hypnosis alone, this is a wonderful technique with which to start. Now, let's go to one more thing. What about the man in dentistry? The man in dentistry, or the man just giving local anesthesia, says to himself, well, that maybe applies to general anesthesia, but that doesn't apply to local. Oh, yes, it does. Gentlemen, you use the technique which I showed you. Take your ampule of xylocaine, and instead of giving them an ampule of xylocaine, now cut it down and give 90% of the xylocaine. You'll get just as good a result as you did with 100%. With your next patient, cut it down to 80. With your next patient, cut it down to 70, 60, 50, 40. And you'll pretty soon find that because of the semantics that you use as you're doing this, that your voice will convey the idea of anesthesia, and you will pretty soon get to the point where many of you will be working with a drop or less of xylocaine or novocaine or whatever it is that you are using and getting just as good an anesthesia as you got with an entire ampule. Now, I have been teaching this technique for quite a number of years now, and I am in a peculiar position. I cannot afford to tell you wrong. The first time I tell a doctor wrong, I lose my classes. And because I am in that vulnerable position, I can never afford to tell you anything which doesn't work like a charm and which I know works like a charm. As you become accustomed to this technique, gentlemen, I assure you that you will love it. You will really love it. I've talked to surgeons and anesthetists who studied with me years ago. Talked with a surgeon not far from here who studied with me a year ago. He says, Dave, since I studied with you, I have never varied that technique, not once. And I have never known it to fail. And gentlemen, in all the years I have been teaching, I have never known this technique to fail. You get the hypnosis and start the anesthesia, but give them about half the amount. I'm not saying to you who are in surgery, cut down to 10% or 25%. No, you're perfectly safe with 50% of the amount of anesthesia that you normally use, and I will tell you this much, that you will be delighted with the surgical anesthesia which you get. The patient will not be ready to walk off the table. Try it, and you'll find that it will work. Now let's go into the next session. Give me number 3, will you please? Our third session is entitled, There is No Way in Which You Cannot Hypnotize a Patient. In your first session, in addition to old-fashioned hypnosis, you learned the art of rapid conditioning using a device which allows you to see the physical changes take place as the patient reaches for the state of suggestibility. In your second session, you learned 4 more methods of inducing the trance state instantly. Now you will learn that the methods of achieving the trance state are limited only by your own imagination. There is no way in which you cannot hypnotize a patient, provided you know the art of suggestion. The old-time practitioners used the fixation method. That is, they had the subject concentrate on either a light or a brilliant object and sought to tire the muscles around the eyes, thus achieving eye closure. Since eye closure is the first goal at which you must aim, all you need is a device that will cause it. Well, any device will cause it, provided you know the art of suggestion and provided the person expects to be hypnotized. Now, you substitute the word relaxed for hypnotized, and every patient who needs the therapeutic values of hypnosis can be relaxed instantly. And we are talking now of patients who have never been previously conditioned. In this method, where we use any device to instantly achieve the trance state, we use the devices as catalysts. Therefore, we call this method the catalyst method of achieving trance. Now, I'll show you what I mean. Have you ever been here before? Have you been here before? Uh-huh. Yes. I want someone who hasn't been here before. Will those of you who haven't been here before raise your hands, please? All right. May I try this with you? Please? No, sit right there. You don't have to move from your chair. I'm going to take 3 puffs on this cigarette. First puff, your eyes are going to get tired. The second puff, they're going to want to close. But wait till the third puff, at which time close them. They will lock and you won't be able to open them. Want that to happen? Expect it to happen and watch it happen. Here's the first puff. Now notice how tired your eyes are getting, and let them get tired. Now they'll get so tired they'll want to close, but don't let them close yet. Now when I take the third puff, they'll close and lock. Let them. Now close them. Find they're locked. When you test them, the harder you test them, the less they'll work. Test them, you'll find you can't make them work. They just won't work at all. That's right. Now, when I snap my fingers, you'll be able to open them very readily. All right, you can open them. Now, there's eye closure achieved by puffing on a cigarette. Let's try it another way. Someone else who hasn't been here, please? Were you ever here before? All right, do you mind if I try this with you? Want this to happen, expect it to happen, and watch it happen. I'm going to take a drink of water, just one swallow, and when I do, your eyes will close, they will lock, and you won't be able to open them. Now, want it to happen, and watch it happen. Close your eyes, and you'll find now that they're locked. They just won't work at all. Test them, and you'll find that you can't make them work. The harder you try, the less they'll work. Now, when I snap my fingers, they'll open very readily. All right, now they'll open. Now you find eye closure achieved by taking a puff on a cigarette. Eye closure achieved by taking a glass of water. Is there anyone else who hasn't been here before? Because I'm showing you that this is on unconditioned people. People that you wouldn't expect would get eye closure, but if they want eye closure, they can get it. I'm going to tap my head. That's all I'll do. And when I tap my head, your eyes will close and lock, and you won't be able to open them. Want it to happen and watch it happen. Now close your eyes. You find they're locked already, and when you test them, they just won't work at all. Test them, you'll see they won't. And there we have perfect eye closure again. All right, you may open your eyes now. Now, it must be perfectly apparent to you that if I can do that with a cigarette, with a glass of water, with a pat on the head, that I can also do it by whistling a tune, singing a song, doing a jig, turning my back on them, walking out of the room, or any other way. But is that some magic I possess? Oh, no. What happened? He wanted eye closure, so he got it. What happened? He wanted eye closure, so he got it. What happened? She wanted eye closure, so she got it. There's no magic that I teach. I'm just teaching you that if you know hypnosis on a scientific level, you can do things with it that seem on the face of it magic, but there's no magic to it. Now, I want to show you that any one of you can do the very same thing. Because, as I say, it's just being darn sure you're going to make it work. And you make it work because you know you're sure. Here, doctor, let's take you. I want you to turn around and pick somebody, if possible, someone who hasn't been here before, and using a technique that 4 weeks ago you'd have said would never hypnotize anybody in the world, use that very same technique that you would say wouldn't work 4 weeks ago to achieve the hypnotic state. Would you do that, doctor? Just let your imagination run riot. You know, be outlandish if you want to. This one time, this is the only time we ever ask you to be outlandish in this course.
I'm going to ask you, first of all, not my problem, I want your eyes. do not remember. All your eyes are not shut. I do not put any distance eyes closed. Eyes closed and your tongue and locked shut.
You see, Doctor, you got it. Now, you might say to yourself, well, nobody ever hypnotized anybody by mopping their brow before. So he let his imagination run a little wild, and he came up with that technique. Well, let's take, here, Doctor, suppose we take you. Let your imagination run wild. Think of a technique that you would swear a few weeks ago would not produce hypnosis. Take somebody, see if we've got any more people who haven't been here before. Working on an unconditioned subject, see if you can get the opening wedge into hypnosis. The eye closer, please. Use a crazy method, a bizarre method. Who hasn't been here before? Is there anybody else who hasn't been here before? She hasn't been here before. Try it on her. But do it loud enough so we can hear you, Doctor.
When I take my lighter out of my pocket and just remember.
Talk louder, Doctor. Can't hear you.
When I take my lighter out of my pocket and hold it in my hand, you want your eyes to go closed, they'll go closed, and won't. So they won't want it to happen when you see me take my lighter. Once your eyes go closed, your eyes are locked,
Test them. No, test them. They won't open, that's right. That's right. Now let her open them. All right. Now, you might say to yourself, if we can get eye closure by lighting a cigarette, taking a drink of water, tapping your head, mopping your brow, or taking a cigarette lighter out of your pocket, that anything will produce the hypnosis. And of course it will. Providing you know the art of suggestion and providing the patient expects to be hypnotized. Well, then there'll come a time when some doctor will say to you, if you can hypnotize by any method within your imagination, and the extent of the imagination is boundless, you ought to be able to hypnotize by doing nothing. Oh, let me tell you how, before I show you that can be done too, let me tell you how I did something many years ago in 1941 that caused a write-up in Reader's Digest and Saturday Evening Post, and the world went crazy about it. Do you remember the time that I had the man go up in the airplane and hypnotize the people down in the radio studio? That was done in 1941. Another time when I had the man be in one studio and hypnotize people in another studio. And you remember how Reader's Digest wrote up these fabulous things? It was merely putting to use knowledge which I had that no other man on earth had, that if you knew how to do it, you could do it. And if you didn't know how to do it, you couldn't do it. But now, someone will always say, well, if you can hypnotize by any method within your imagination, hypnotize by doing nothing, because after all, nothing becomes something in this instance and becomes a method by which to hypnotize. Can you do it? Of course you can do it. But you must know the theory behind it. I must get over to the person the fact that I want the eye closure to occur. So I'll tell you, we'll just prove it on everybody in the room. I won't do anything, and every one of you get eye closure. Just try it. You'll see that now, if you notice all the number that has eye closure, the instant that you close your eyes, you've got eye closure. If you let it happen, and I see every one of you testing, so I know that you've got it. Now, to whom who didn't make it happen? Those who didn't try it. But if you all try it, you know you can get eye closure just as fast as you close your eyes. And so you say, well, now, wait a minute. It isn't necessary to tap your head. It isn't necessary to mop your brow. It isn't necessary to take your cigarette lighter out of your pocket. It isn't necessary to light a cigarette. It isn't necessary to do any of these things. You don't have to bring the hand down in front of the person's eyes. You don't have to use the two-finger eye closure method. You can do nothing but use words and convey the idea of eye closure and still get as good an eye closure as you can possibly get in this world. Well, now we're armed with information which we didn't have before. And armed with this information, that you can get eye closure by merely conveying the idea by words, we should be able to get a better state of hypnosis than any we have ever worked with up to this point. And I think we are. And let me show you how that technique is arrived at. Now, before we start practicing tonight, I want to make it clear that last year and in all other years, I used to allow my students 1 minute to get the light state, 2 additional minutes to get the deep state. That has ended. Students of mine now must get this entire state, the deep state of hypnosis, within 1 minute. No longer will we go for the 3-minute routine. There are shortcuts to the shortcuts. And I am going to ask you not to make any of those shortcuts tonight. We will practice the 3-minute routine tonight. But as you get more adept with hypnosis, I want you to be able to cut it down to 1 minute from the time that person enters the door of your office. I want you to have deep hypnosis within 1 minute. Now, tonight you will be working with deep hypnosis, not light stuff, not the relaxation state, not the pre-hypnotic state, but now you will be working from this point on with deep hypnosis. And I want you to work to that end and practice to that end where you will get the state within 1 minute. Only by making hypnosis possible in its deepest stages within 1 minute are we going to be successful in making hypnosis an important part of medicine and its allied branches. The man who uses hypnosis on the idea that I can take 15 minutes to do it will soon discard hypnosis except on special, rare cases, and even on those cases he won't be able to afford it. Because hypnosis is a matter of economics just like any other tool in your office. And if it isn't an economical tool for you to use, you can't afford to use it. So while we are going to practice the 3-minute routine tonight, I am going to show you as we go along how to get it within 1 minute. And I want every person in class to be able to do it within 1 minute. Let's start right off the reel. Let's get somebody who hasn't been here before. You were the first one I worked with. May I show you this state? Would you come up here and sit here, please? The only reason I'm having you sit there is because I want to make sure that we're getting all this on the tape. Are you a layman or a doctor?
Minister.
Minister. All right. Reverend, I take it? How do they address you?
Staley.
What?
Reverend Staley.
Reverend Stanley. All right, Reverend Stanley, will you just take a good long deep breath and close your eyes? Now, relax the muscles around your eyes to the point where those eye muscles won't work. And when you're sure they won't work, test them and make sure they won't work. No, you're making sure they will work. Relax them to the point where they won't work. When you're sure they won't work, test them. Make sure they won't work. Test them hard. No, don't relax them to the point where they will work. Relax them to the point where they won't work. Get complete relaxation so in those eye muscles around the eyes. Now let that feeling go right down to the toes once you're satisfied that those eye muscles are completely relaxed. Are they completely relaxed? Test them. Make sure they won't work. That's right. That's right. That's right. Keep them. Once you've got them to the point where they won't work, let that feeling go down to your toes. Now, in just a moment, we're going to do this again. And when we do it the second time, you're going to be able to relax 10 times as much as you've relaxed already. Now open your eyes. Now close your eyes. Now completely relax. Let yourself be covered with a blanket of relaxation. Now the third time we do it, you'll be able to double the relaxation which you now have. Now open your eyes. Now relax. Now I'm going to lift your hand and drop it. And if you followed orders up to this point, that hand will be just as limp as a dish rag and will just plop into your lap. No, now let me lift it. Don't you lift it at all. That's right. Let me lift it. Let that be heavy. You can't lift it. I can. That's good. But let's open and close the eyes again and double that relaxation. Now, double it to the point. Now send it right down to your toes. Now let that hand be heavy as lead. You'll feel it when you've got the real relaxation. Now you got it. You could feel that, couldn't you? Now, that's complete physical relaxation, Reverend Staley. But I want to show you how you can get mental relaxation as well as physical. So I'm going to ask you to start counting, when I tell you to, from 100 backwards. Close your eyes, please. Keep your eyes closed. And each time you say a number, double your relaxation. Hold on to that physical relaxation while you do it. Each time you say a number, double your relaxation. By the time you get down to 97, you'll be so relaxed there won't be any more numbers. Now, start with the idea of making that happen and watch it happen. Out loud, please.
100.
Now, double your relaxation and watch the numbers start disappearing.
99.
Now watch them go.
98.
Now they'll be gone. Isn't that a nice feeling?
97.
Make it happen, Reverend. You've got to do it. I can't do it from sitting here. You've got to make them happen. Make them disappear now. Dispel them. Make them vanish. They all gone? Make them vanish. They all gone? Now, because this is such a, well, I'm not going to say a word about the state, but this is the state of somnambulism, attested by the fact that he was able to dispel those numbers. Now, because you've never seen this state, never worked with it, I'm going to let Reverend Stanley tell you just how he feels from inside. Stay as relaxed as you are and tell the folks exactly what the feeling is from inside the state, Reverend. How do you feel?
Tired.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Warm.
Warm. First sign of hypnosis, warm. What else, Reverend? Is it a pleasant feeling?
Swaying. Fighting.
That means that he's letting himself go into somnambulism and come out of it. But now stay in the somnambulism. Stay in this relaxed state. That'll lose that feeling of flighty. I know. Now describe any further signs that you feel. Is it a pleasant state, Reverend?
It's not unpleasant.
Not unpleasant. Detached. In other words, it is in this state that the patient feels like all is well with the world and that anything within reason seems possible, and therefore the patient accepts your suggestions almost without criticism. If it's a pleasant suggestion aimed for the good of the patient, he will accept your suggestion unquestioningly. If he has doubts about it being good for himself, he'll reject it. No one in the world, for example, Reverend Stanley happens to be in church work and I'm going to ask him, do you think anybody could persuade you to do anything against your ethics or your code of morals at this point? No. This nonsense that people try to put out, that if you get a person hypnotized, can't you get them to do something they wouldn't ordinarily do? Couldn't you get them to jump out a window? Couldn't you get them to tell him he has good reason for attacking somebody and he'll attack somebody? Friends, that is nonsense. The person in hypnosis, and let the Reverend tell you that, and verify what I'm saying, has greater awareness than the person not in the hypnosis. That's right. You see what I mean? That's right. You feel such a great awareness. You think you're hearing my voice. He's hearing it better than any of you. You could be carrying on a telephone conversation back there. Two people could be carrying on or one person could be carrying on the telephone conversation from this end. Or a group of people back there could be talking. His awareness is such that while he's listening to my voice, he could also tell you exactly what the person back there was talking about. And this, not many of you are able to do, for if your attention is here, you don't hear the car going by outside. But the person in hypnosis, his awareness is such that he can tell you anything that happens within his hearing. And many times we've tested this. Did you hear the other doctor talking? Someone will say, and he'll say, look, I was so relaxed, but I could hear everything way back there, and he said so-and-so, and you answered so-and-so, and he answered so-and-so. It's a very lovely state. Now,